pharmacists are the actual medication experts, whereas like you go to, okay, good. Yeah, like somebody goes to med school, to get to become an MD, they're essentially getting like 2 semesters of pharmaceutical meds, whereas pharmacists are getting 7 years of studying nothing but that. And so, pharmacists are the medicine experts, doctors are the diagnostic experts. Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today for today's presentation on drug-drug interactions between cannabinoid therapy and pharmaceutical medications. So drug-drug interactions, or DDIs, they occur when one drug affects the activity of another when both are administered at the same time. And so understanding these drug-drug interactions is becoming crucial as the use of cannabinoid therapy is becoming more and more prevalent. Okay. So like I was just saying, it's just the increased use, so we're delving into the significance, specifically of cannabinoid therapy. And so with the increasing availability and use of cannabinoid products for a variety of medical conditions, it's becoming more and more necessary for people to understand these potential interactions. Leading to these different adverse effects. And a lot of folks are just like, it's natural, it comes from the earth, there's no danger to it, there's no problem, but there is actually a lot of potential issues. Okay. So to kind of understand how these drug-drug interactions work, it comes down to basic mechanisms of action. So there are pharmacokinetic interactions, which affect both the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion of the drugs from your body. And then there's pharmacodynamic actions, which occur when the 2 drugs directly affect each other when taken together. So there's also enzyme induction, and that can play, there's enzyme induction and inhibition. And so you're looking at a particular medication can stop another medicine from working, or it can advance it and make it work faster. So for example, CBD is a CYP inhibitor. CYP is an enzyme that a lot of, that CBD and THC are really metabolized through. And so CBD is a CYP inhibitor, which means that it can slow the metabolism of certain drugs in the body. So you get a buildup of it, like clobazepam, which is for seizures. It slows the metabolism if you take the CBD with that. And so it's going to actually stay in your system longer. And so if you're dosing it at a regular increment and your body's not excreting it quick enough, you're going to get a buildup of too much of that drug in your system. And THC is metabolized by CYP, another CYP inhibitor, another CYP enzyme. And it competes for metabolism with drugs like warfarin, phenytoin, and sulfonylureas. So there's a lot of additive effects that can come with that. And so you're looking at like additional CNS depression, being extra tired. There's just a lot that could come with that when it's battling, it's competing for who's going to metabolize first. Okay, so in regards to metabolism, liver is where is the primary site where all these compounds are broken down. Like I mentioned, the key enzymes involved are from the CYP450 family, which is also responsible for the metabolism of all pharmaceutical drugs, or most. So inhibiting or inducing these enzymes can significantly impact the drug levels and the efficacy, making it crucial to understand that these interactions, what they are and how to avoid them. Okay. So there's the common cannabinoid medications. We've got THC and CBD. These are the 2 most well-known cannabinoids. And they're available in various pharmaceutical forms, like Dr. Weeks had mentioned, so we've got edibles and tinctures and flour for inhalation, etc. There's also some pharmaceutical medications that are used for seizures. Like Marinol and Epidiolex. And so one is used for appetite stimulant in cancer patients. The other is for seizures. And so there's just understanding the forms and the uses of these different cannabinoids is going to help understand the therapeutic applications and potential interactions. Okay, so this is kind of the crux of it all, right? These really popular medications that lots of people are on that have these significant interactions. Anti-epileptics and anticoagulants in particular, so like warfarin, that's a really big one. So many people are on warfarin as blood thinner that are also using THC or CBD therapeutics. And what it does is the warfarin ends up staying in your system longer than it should. And so it's increasing your bleed risk. It's making you even more at risk for an incredibly, like, a massive amount of blood loss, basically. I like this little table here just because it kind of shows some of the more popular immunomedications, but antidepressants, which is a really big one, because it's another medication that a ton of people are on, and they don't understand that there is a direct correlation between THC, CBD, and how these antidepressants or various medications work in the body. But let us not forget, over-the-counter stuff counts too. A lot of people forget about that, but you can't always be transparent with your medical providers, because they need to know even these different, like, over-the-counter herbal supplements can't have interactions and effects. So there are particular patient populations that are at a greater risk for having these drug-drug interactions, be it your elderly patients, polypharmacy patients, if people are on a ton of different medications, anybody who's had bariatric surgery or has a malabsorption issues, but with seizures. They're definitely, and liver disease, because that's where it's processed in the body. So people who are in any of these patient populations are at greater risk of experiencing drug-drug interactions. So even more important to communicate. Just kind of being able to recognize the symptoms of a drug-drug interaction, right? It can be dizziness, sedation, GI issues. You've got to really monitor yourself, listen to your body, and let your doctor know if you're experiencing any of these things, because adjustments to medications can be made in order to lessen these, potential interactions. So a couple of case studies, things like real world stuff. So our first case involves THC and warfarin. So warfarin is commonly prescribed anticoagulant, and THC can influence its effectiveness by inhibiting the metabolism of warfarin. So that's what I was saying before, where it builds up in your system, increases blood thinning, and potential bleed risks. So in this particular case, patient experienced significantly prolonged bleeding times due to elevated warfarin levels. And so for that, your doctor will want to monitor your INR levels. That number will tell you the bleed risk that you're at. And so if it gets too high or too low, again, your warfarin can be adjusted so you can continue your cannabinoid therapy and let's safely avoid that extra bleed risk. The second case focuses on CBD and clobazam. So that's prescribed for seizure control, and CBD dramatically increases the levels of that drug by inhibiting its hepatic metabolism. So it's leading to excessive sedation, potential toxicity, and in this particular case, the person was being treated for epilepsy. They experienced severe drowsiness and coordination issues. Severe drowsiness and coordination issues after adding CBD to the regimen. So the case studies really highlight the necessity for personalized medicine and vigilance for healthcare providers when managing patients who are using cannabis or cannabinoid therapies in conjunction with their other medications. So, as I mentioned, there are ways that we can monitor for this. And so it's going to be really taking note of any potential interactions that you might be experiencing. If you're a provider, really getting into the patient's history. You need to know everything that they're taking, how often they take it, what the doses are, so that way you can really evaluate the medications, assess the risks, and kind of go from there. Clinical guidelines and tools, boy, there's just not a lot of them yet. Research is where we're really lacking right now, and it's because of the federal scheduling of it being a Schedule I substance, which has really hindered the ability to do the research that we need to provide these clinical guidelines and tools. We're getting there, slowly but surely. Again, I mentioned, communicating openly with your physicians. This is going to be the #1 thing for really helping to prevent these potential interactions. Clinicians need to actively encourage their patients to self-report any adverse effects or unusual symptoms. That way it enables, timely interventions and adjustments to their therapy. It's also important for providers to foster a culture of collaborative decision-making because patients need to feel empowered in their own treatments as well. So fortunately, we are at a point now where we're starting to get a little bit more research going. So studies are starting to be conducted more and more. And so the more information that we get, the more improvement of patient safety we can get. Okay, so just the key takeaways here. So understanding DDIs. It's crucial for the safe and effective use of cannabinoid therapies. So we've covered some basic mechanisms of these interactions, highlighted some specific patient populations at greater risk, and reviewed strategies for clinical management. So the importance of open communication between patients and clinicians cannot be overstated, as it plays a vital role in identifying and managing potential interactions. So stay informed, stay vigilant, and we can minimize the risks and maximize the therapeutic benefits of cannabinoid therapies. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes. Just maybe want to make a comment on the research studies. I think you just need to, sometimes you need to know where to look for them because not everybody, I guess some of the research studies are not, everybody's not going to have, I don't know, access it or whatnot. So, just maybe looking for the right information, way to put it on. Just depends what kind of research you're looking for. Then, then maybe if you know the right person or group or whatever, you might be able to find something because there is a lot of research out there. There has been for many years.
Yeah, comparatively speaking, there's not nearly as much on cannabis as there is on basically everything else in the medical community.
Kind of disagree. There is a lot of research out there. There's a lot of research out there. I disagree with that one. There's a lot of research. There's been research for.
I'm going to follow up and say that most of that research has been not done correctly. And a lot of that research that we've looked at has been done by people like drug treatment rehab centers have funded a lot of that. People have funded a lot of those studies that aren't necessarily doing observational studies from a
So science is a tool which we use, and to understand cannabis, and especially what you're speaking of right now, science has to get involved and do some research. And while there probably is more research out there, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's expanded or went out as far as we need it to go. So my mother, this was talking a lot to me because my mother has a lot of issues. She's been diagnosed with cancer. She almost had to have major surgery done on her neck and her spine. And all of it didn't even need to happen. She didn't even have cancer. It was just, there was just so many things that she was seeing so many doctors. And now she's got lesions on her brain, and they're telling her the lesions are because she's got a clogged artery in her neck. And that's what's causing her to walk like a toddler when she gets up in the morning. And so it's concerning to me as her daughter because I'm seeing my mother go through all of these processes. She smokes cannabis, and I'm just like, I have never once heard a doctor say, well, let's figure out what's going on between cannabis and all of these medications we keep feeding you. And let's find an alternative or somewhere in the middle of, is this the direction we need to keep going in, or asking more questions? Because really, I think that's what we're supposed to be doing as humans, asking more questions. Absolutely. You will advance and get better with time.
I mean, it could be something as simple as needing to delay taking a pharmaceutical medication and then when you use the THC. I mean, sometimes just separating by a few hours is enough to allow the things to process the way that they need to. You're not competing for enzymes because something's already there and doing its job, And so there's physicians just aren't trained. Pharmacists aren't trained. And so like, that's kind of what I'm trying to do is like get in there and get our providers to really know what's going on and figure out ways, the right questions to ask, and really delving in when a person has so many different doctors and the doctors aren't talking to each other. They're just relying on some sort of electronic medical records, across the board, and let's read what's in there and what are their notes. But there's so much more to it than that. And the fact that there's that lack of communication in the multiple doctors causes a ton of issues with medicines.
I appreciate what you're doing. Is there a way that I can access to visualize this on my own, the stuff you were showing up there?
I don't see why not. I can email it to Gabby if you want.
Yeah, because is that what you were doing, or you basically streaming?
Yeah, it's on YouTube, so we can certainly give you the file, and you can.
Yeah, I can
You
email the PowerPoint
can,
too.
yeah, absolutely. Other questions?
So if you're on, I've heard this before, but if you're on Eloquent, so with warfarin and THC extends the life of warfarin, so you're gonna have.
It builds it up in the body so it's stronger. Essentially, you're getting like a higher dose of warfarin than what you actually need.
Does it do the same thing with Eliquis or any of those?
Yes, any anticoagulant.
So if one is having surgery, you're supposed to go off Eliquis 3 days earlier if you're using THC CBD. Can THC CBD replace the mechanism of action of Eliquis?
No, I wouldn't ever recommend like just stopping a pharmaceutical, especially like a blood thinner. But there are ways to kind of do it safely and effectively. But no, I definitely wouldn't stop taking a pharmaceutical med. It's not one for the other. You can't swap it out. It doesn't negate the need for it. Does that make sense? Like you'll still need the warfarin or the Eliquis because THC doesn't thin the blood the way that those do. It just slows down how the warfarin is metabolized in the body. So it's not doing what warfarin does. It's just stopping warfarin from breaking down.
And then to follow up on, I'm walking polypharmacy with some exceptions, but as far as like mental health meds, will that decrease the efficacy of CBD, THC, and vice versa, the medication?
Yeah, essentially. So what it's doing with the antidepressants is it's competing for that the receptor in the brain, right? And so if like say that the THC gets to that receptor first, it's going to block your antidepressant from getting to that receptor to do what it needs to do. And so you'll end up with a lower dose essentially of the antidepressant that you need. It's that whole inhibition, and induction. That is what I was looking for. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So with the rise in as a pharmacist, what would you say are the 3 top drug concerns you know of other drugs?
Well, really the ones that I was discussing in here. So warfarin for sure, because so many people are on that. Same with the antidepressants. Those are like the main categories really are going to be the antidepressants and the blood thinners. Those are the ones that the majority of the population are on. They're also using, THC or different cannabinoid therapies.
I have a question about just your own experience, your endeavor. It's wild, it's so challenging. I think it's amazing that you're doing this. It's very pioneering. Welcome. I'm just wondering, what your experience has been in your opportunities to talk to doctors. What are you going in a more functional medicine avenue, or do you feel like there's more of an opening there, or do you want to bring this to the big people?
A little bit of both, actually.
Yeah.
So, on my website, I actually have it kind of split up for services for providers and then services for patients, kind of depending on what it is that they're wanting to do. I do want to get in and I was trying to reach out to Kroger because they have their corporate training center downtown or in Westchester, actually. And so they get all the pharmacists together when they're in training. Why not give a quick drug-drug interaction talk to the pharmacist at that point, because it's not being taught in schools. I have reached out to the College of Pharmacy at UC, trying to at least create a course, if not an entire training program, regarding cannabis and pharmaceuticals, because it has to happen. I mean, people may or may not agree with it, but it's happening, and so we need to be informed, you know. Yes, sir.
More from what you're saying, somebody adds THC when they're taking that, they have less bleeds, you're saying?
More.
Or just bleeding less when they do bleed?
They'll bleed more, actually. So, warfarin is the blood thinner, right? And so when you're taking it, then you use THC. The THC is going to slow down warfarin breaking down in your system. And so it'll build up, making the bleed risk higher. Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time. Cannabinoidadvisory.com.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
All right.